Okay, well, welcome to the Rotary Club of Milwaukee's. Here comes Laura Hawks. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Milwaukee's Thursday snack program. As those of you who are here know, this is what we do on Thursdays. We have a program that's very informal, and we encourage people from Rotary and the community to join us in this informal conversation. And today we are very pleased to welcome Shannon Ross. And Shannon served 17 years in prison in Wisconsin for what he describes as a massively stupid act of revenge when he was a teenager. But he went on to create the community, which we're going to hear about today, in 2014, and has run it ever since with the invaluable help of friends and family. He finished his bachelor's degree while he was incarcerated, and upon his release, he began a fellowship as a grad student at UW-Milwaukee in the Sustainable Peace Building Program, and is with the Wisconsin Decarceration Platform. He's also a member of Reentry, Rising MKE, and Unlock Higher Ed. And so I can't wait to hear what he has to say. I'm really looking forward to this, and welcome, Shannon.
Thank you for having me. So I think being the informal setting, I'm just going to talk a bit about myself, and I won't talk much about myself because I find myself to be rather drab compared to the work that I'm trying to pursue. And then I'll go into the community and the facets of that, and how I think it ties into a broader principle in life, a broader conversation, just outside of the area of reentry and reform that my work is pretty much in. So I grew up in Milwaukee, born and raised. 47th and North Avenue is where I currently still am living and where I grew up at for the next probably 3 or 4 months until I move in with my now pregnant girlfriend in West Dallas. And we have to find ourselves another home after that. So growing up in Milwaukee, I grew up mixed. I am white passing, which is a term that I think has come across recent years. I never even heard about that until the last couple, maybe year or two. And being such in Black neighborhoods and Black schools and Black summer camps and Black circles growing up my whole life, I was largely looked at or picked on as like the white kid. And then I would go around white kids and I would be like the Black kid. So it was just, I could never find a happy medium there as being mixed, which is a common story for most people that are mixed. And so that kind of allowed me to create a chip on my shoulder over time, being bullied, kind of being a more gentle face. I didn't have a beard and everything when I was younger. So these things allowed me to be a target when I was coming up and getting a chip on my shoulder. And that led to me over time when I started selling drugs in high school. Nothing major, wasn't a kingpin, just selling weed to people that I knew. I was robbed one night and I responded, as you said, Mary, very ridiculously over the top, immaturely, a stupid mistake that, caused the loss of life for another fellow teenager, and a lot of destruction on both sides in my family and his family, and I'm sure in the community as well where it happened at. Then I went to prison for 17 years. I was sentenced to 17 years. Before going, I had just finished my freshman year at UWM. So I went in with a grounding in higher education. I had already been, pursuing that. I already had study habits. I already had a mental infrastructure on how to digest the course and get through one and write papers. So it wasn't something that I had to learn when I got in, like many people do when they come in with very little education. And so when I got in about 4 years after I got in, my aunt spurred me to start taking courses again. And over the course of 11 years at that point, so 4 years in, and then 11 more years, I finished my bachelor's degree in business administration from Adams State. I went through a total of, beyond UWM, 8 other schools while I was incarcerated, so a total of 9. And that was just jumping around to try and save money on classes, save money on books. It's not easy to take courses while you're in prison because they have a lot of rules for the most ridiculous things. You can't get a used textbook for one. You can't rent a textbook. You have to, you have to spend money on ways that in society you would not have to because they have options. And there's just not a block against people helping you out, students studying. There's just a lot of things inside that make it difficult. I had an article in the Boston Review talking about that whole experience as well. And I did finish though in 2015 was about, no, 15 years in. So 2017 is when I finished. And I wrote a couple of things over time as well before I got released. That Boston Review article kind of led, I think, to me getting looked at for the graduate program at UWM, which is where I currently am a student. I was allowed to get a scholarship before I was released for the Masters of Sustainable Peace Building program through the nursing school at UWM. So I'm finishing right now my first year with that, going into my summer field work, and then my next summer semester. I mean, my next year, well, and I'll be done. I'm very eager to move on from school. I'm not a big fan of formal education because I feel like I'm somebody who can study on my own and learn things. And I feel like there's a lot of extra stuff that comes along with formal education that's not really necessary for the field one will be getting into. But it also is very beneficial for connections and that paper that had at to show that you can, go through with such a program and that you are somebody who's reliable if you're given a responsibility on a job. So there's definitely value to it. So I got out and I started to take the community, which I started when I was inside, a bit further. And I'm gonna kind of share a screen show some things. I think most people right now on the call have seen some of this that I showed at a presentation yesterday, and it's in the past as well. But I'm not going to go through it in the sense that I did yesterday with notes, but I'll just talk about some of these concepts. So the whole principle behind the community, it wasn't this way really at first. I didn't recognize that it was, but it actually, it just, as sometimes I know when you're writing a book, things start to match each other as you go through the book without you consciously thinking about it. And that's kind of how I think it is that from the very beginning, my goal was to meet people exactly where they are with this newsletter that we created. So it began as just a newsletter called The Community. And it went out to 200 some people at the time, just a basic reading list. And what we were doing is we were meeting people where they are. Because what happens when people come to prison, when they enter the system, really, not prison, as soon as they're arrested, everybody comes in with some degree of brokenness. There's an injury, there's a fracture, as I'm calling it. These x-rays here kind of reference that, how everyone comes in with a different degree of injury, but the point is that they all have an injury, and it has to be handled as like a health issue, like a treatment. You don't just force treatment on everybody. You have different treatments. It depends on the person, it depends on the individual. And so even though we can't do much when it comes to helping people with who they are, you can do a lot with the treatment form of it. And so the first issue, as it says here, this is our very first issue, our purpose was to connect, and the goal was to connect as many people as we could in this space. So it would be people who are incarcerated with each other, people who are incarcerated with what's going on out in society, and groups that are doing work on behalf of those who are incarcerated to connect them to each other as well more. And that's what really the Wisconsin Decarceration Platform that I'm involved in is doing on really trying to amplify that on a much grander scale than we were trying to do with the community, to really make people that are in this space be able to communicate and collaborate better. But the newsletter focused largely on people in prison. And so it had that principle of treatment starts with a relationship, meeting people exactly where they are, and treating people like they are people when they're in, and they will behave like people when they get out. It sounds like a crazy, obvious concept, but that's not what happens by and large in the prison system. And that's not what happens by and large in society when it comes to the way we handle people that are underprivileged or that are in communities that are farther away from us, that may not have as many resources and may be struggling. We tend to look at them in a certain way that dehumanizes them and then furthers the issue. And it also dehumanizes ourselves, because in order to dehumanize somebody else, you have to dehumanize yourself first. What we have gone to now is a newsletter that goes into 9,500 people in the Wisconsin prison system. We've had about 10,500 sign up over time. The reason for that 1,000 difference is because people get released and they still stay on our list in case they come back, but they're not currently getting the issue. But they can get it when they get out. Everything's available on our website. And this is our current, most recent issue that I put together with Dr. Hawks and some faculty and students at Yale. And we were able to get information into the prison system to our readers. It's just actually been arriving the last couple of days to them to explain, again, the vaccine, and to talk about the distrust in the community in there, and to talk about how they, don't get information and they can't really trust what the DOC is saying, not only what the news is saying, what the DOC is saying as well. So, we're a credible messenger. We've had a relationship with people inside for a long time, and just having this information presented by somebody like us who's been there for them in a variety of ways before society wanted them to listen. Everybody wants people that are in these communities now to listen. And it's like, how can we get them to pay attention about the COVID vaccine? Well, you should have been paying attention. You should have been caring. That's the issue. So now is the time where you start a long dialogue of actually doing that. So in this issue, we presented quotes here from Cecilia Colon and Jerome Dillard and other people who are well known as fighting for people in prison and reentry and reform. Have some comics that we included as well. Whatever happens, don't go back to 2020. Some commentary from Dr. Corbett, who was behind the development of the vaccine. It's very important that she's a Black woman and she has people that her family members that are incarcerated or were incarcerated, because the issue is more amplified in communities of color. We have some diagrams that were put together custom by the faculty that we at Yale that we worked with, FAQs addressing some of the main points that our readers were asking us about with the vaccine, the concerns they had. And we had a deeper dive that we went into as well for article excerpts. We also added something recently about the J&J vaccine. I think that might have to be touched up on the website. And yeah, so just all in all, this was just a variety of ways to try and connect with those inside so that they could see, what was going on with the vaccine more than what had been the case that they were hearing from other people. So, I think this presentation went away for a second. I'm gonna share screen again. So the next slide is talking about our Correct the Narrative campaign efforts. And this is our outreach portion. I'll get into it a bit here today, but mostly the way this ties into those inside is that these are videos that we've done that we show of people who are successful examples of those who have criminal records. So these are just vignettes we've done, interviews, and we get video footage of their family, the work that they do. And it's very empowering because we're correcting the narrative that society has about us, but we also need to correct the narrative that we have about ourselves. And that's the hugest issue for people when they're inside, is that self-esteem is the greatest barrier to them succeeding when they get out, because you don't care about personal development. You don't care about education. You don't care about spirituality. You don't care about your kids. You don't care about your life. And there's a lot of drug, addiction for people inside because there's not this belief in yourself. And so this is all trying to combat that directly, to show that even though you have a criminal record, even though there's a stigma in society, there are so many people that have succeeded with that stigma. And these are all examples of that. And we have more coming regularly, and we have more interviews scheduled. We have more projects as well to kind of get the word out about that. And we're also going to be doing footage of the organizations that are doing this work as well, because to know what's out here to help them is really important. Instead of just reading about it, you can see it in video footage. And we have a relationship with a tablet platform called Adovo that across the country, we are currently in 30,000 jails and prisons across the country. Well, not 30,000 people we have access to by the jails and prisons they're at across the country. And within 6 months, that will be a way to actually make this work in place before I went forward with it. And so we're actually going forward with it now, just kind of putting together some of the actual content at this stage. But currently, career preparation in prison is similar to this. It's survival of the fittest. Some can, but most can't. I know when I was inside, I was not able to get a lot of information, and I had a lot of support, but I was not able to get a lot of information about things that, had I had that, I could have gotten out and gotten involved in certain areas or taken advantage of opportunities very readily. But because I spent years inside without really basic information that is available, it was just it didn't allow me to take off as successfully as would have been preferred for not only myself, but really anybody. Society wants people to come out prepared. And that's the one key difference, I think, with what we focus on than a lot of groups that do reentry work, is there's a lot of focus on a person when he gets out, when she gets out, when they get out. But why are we not focusing more on what we can do, the years that they're spending inside? And there's so much we can do in that area. It's not as much work as it sounds. And you don't always need the DOC to do that. And we have a model that allows that to happen. So with this custom career approach, we will be getting people information about any career that they are interested in. We'll be helping them find out what they have an aptitude for, working with the way out, so that they both now have information on what it takes to get into a field, the bureaucratic barriers, the financial barriers, and the legal barriers. If you have a criminal record, maybe you can't even get into that field. And then you also, with the aptitude portion, have an understanding of what it is that you are good at. So you'll have something you're choosing now based on information about yourself and the field that is going to be sustainable for you. And the third step will be training. We will have freelancers, we will have mentors who will be willing to and able to give 2, 3, 4 hours a week to specific individuals. And these won't be anybody who signs up. It'll be people who show that they're serious about it. And that's easy to do. You just give people a certain basic homework that they have to do to show that they're sincere. And it's kind of the one barrier to get in. I know from when I was inside that a lot of people won't go through that barrier. So that'll kind of weed out people who are not at that stage where they can take it serious. If they ever are at that stage, let us know. We'll definitely try and get you literature and a mentor or a freelancer in a field who can help you get more acclimated to what it takes to enter that field. And these will be sponsored by companies. They will be directly involved, industries and companies who will be getting us information that they know they want their employees to have. So these are things that we've talked to companies about and business owners about, who are both not well versed in the population of people coming out or are well versed and they already are hiring people. And they spoke about the weaknesses they see in the job readiness programs the DOC currently has or that exist out here. And they said that this would hit upon those issues that they have with it being very general, it being very, when you're in prison, take this program or don't take it. But if you don't take it, you won't get an early release possibility, or you won't get a move to a work release facility or a facility closer to home. So there's a coercion to take things that people don't actually have an interest in. I have a personal story for that. I was near 6 classes away from finishing my degree, and they tried to force me into horticulture. It made no sense. Why would you force me into horticulture when I'm taking courses that my family is paying for? So it's something that I both know from experience, from talking to other people that were inside as myself and business owners, that this is really a powerful way to have people coming out not only prepared in technical skills, but more so with the life skills aspect of it as well, which is so difficult to train people for. Work ethic, it's so difficult to train people for when they're out, but we have years to get people that information and understanding of what that requirement is for a job, for an employer now before they're released, instead of doing it when they're released and they're lost in the sea of freedom. So this is kind of all the things that we have going on with our pre-entry and helping those inside acquire a greater self-esteem about themselves, better information, and just meeting them always exactly where they are. Maybe they're not even ready to hear this. Maybe they just need to have somebody to talk to or ask questions to, or feel that they're a human being, that they're valuable, because you won't get to employee if you don't get to human being first. So you have to help people see that they're a human being and treat them as such before you start to train them for something, before you start to expect them to behave in a certain way upon release that we would all want, that they want for themselves, but they have to be seen as a person first. So this is all that same theme of meeting people where they are. And that's I think the general overall theme about what the work that I'm involved in is trying to get people to do. Even though it's focused on reentry and reform, the overall goal is to help people, understand that when you're trying to have someone come up to a better place in their life, or you're trying to encourage somebody, or trying to offer assistance, you have to meet them where they are. There's a well-known quote about people, they don't care what you say. What is it? They don't, what's the care? I think, yeah, they don't care what you know until they know that you care. That's what it is. So, that's the first step of all this, and that's kind of behind everything we do. And there's kind of other angles and arms to the octopus of the organization that we're running, but beneath it all is meeting people exactly where they are. I think that's my overall message and the walk that I try to go forward with in life. So I feel like I've talked a lot there, and I'm going to stop and see if anybody has any questions.
That was a lot of information, and you delivered it very well, Shannon. And thank you for all the work that you're doing. Do you work in collaboration with the Department of Corrections, or it would seem to me that a lot of what you want to do must require some support from them. Is that true, or?
Yes and no. We have an informal relationship. Every issue we send in, I send to the security director. This is, I think we're on the 3rd or 4th one since we've existed. And so we try to make sure that they're okay with the information we send in. We actually got blocked at one point accidentally, I was told. It was supposed to be one issue. It had one comment in it that they had blocked. They didn't mean to block us entirely. So we had to rebuild our readership back up. And it was a blessing in disguise because it allowed other organizations that had not realized the value we were offering. People were contacting those organizations saying, what's happening in the community? What happened to the community? So it was beneficial in that sense. But then from then, we've always worked with the security director. Now, we can't work formally with them because I am on paper. And this is the issue that came up with the COVID vaccine issue. They had reached out and they were going to fund the entire operation. But because they can't legally contract with somebody who is on supervision, they had to, fall away. And so they tried to find the person we were working with at the DOC tried to find other support for us. We ended up just, funding it on our own with partnerships with Curto at Marquette and the Medical College of Wisconsin. But ultimately, no, formally they can't, but informally, we definitely do. And I'm in touch with them about things. I would say probably every week, at least once a week, I talk to them about something.
Well, the work you want to do to help people prepare for reentry, doesn't that have to happen in prison? So how are you able to do that?
Well, the newsletter goes directly to 9,500 people inside. Okay. So that's our direct access. And we don't need to have the DOC approve that because it's like mail. We just need to make sure we don't do anything to draw their ire and make them block issues or block us entirely, because they could easily shut us down at any chance, any time they want to. So it's very important that we maintain both a not being a puppet of the DOC, but at the same time not being just vicious towards the DOC. Being fair. And I've always tried to do that. I feel like I have always seen the problem from both sides, understanding it as a management and a bureaucracy issue, because a lot of times inside we want to think, oh, why can't they just do this? And why can't they just change that? And it's like, you just can't turn the Titanic around. It doesn't operate like that with a huge entity like the Department of Corrections. But at the same time, there's a lot of things they can do that they don't. And so trying to find that balance between holding them accountable with our readers, but at the same time being fair and explaining this is why something can't happen or it isn't happening or it will take time. So that's our direct access, though, is that we can go right to them because, we've been doing it for so long, and it's been working to get that information to them and answer questions. It's a continual conversation. Even when we don't send an issue, I right now have probably 30 emails I have to respond to from people inside, with about 30 more I haven't even got to see yet that have to get sent to me from the person that processes them. So it's a constant conversation with those inside, even outside of the issues.
Very good. Any more questions from our audience here?
I have a question, Shannon. You have a lot of irons in the fire. You're always going. And I listen to your podcast as well, which you didn't plug, which you should. And you kind of have this sense of urgency to get things done. And we both know there's a lot of work to be done in the system. How do you choose what to focus on?
I think maybe sometimes when I talk about the stuff that I'm doing, it does sound like a lot of different arms. But I feel that it is one main niche that I have just found myself really focusing on. And I think part of what I'm doing is also finding where I might be wrong about that. Maybe I need to chisel it down even more to more of a niche. But what the area that I've always been interested in focusing on, even when I was in, is the gaps. There are a lot of organizations doing a lot of good work in this space that deserve more support rather than more competition. And we hear of so many groups out here, and even when I was inside, that there would be people who would say, when I get out, I want to start this place or that place. And I would say, those exist. Like, why start another one? Just go work with the ones that already exist, or just, I think when you get out and you start to look around, you'll realize that, there are a lot of things you just didn't know about. And I think that is the area that I always want to not do. I don't want to be competing. I don't want to be just another one doing something that has already been done well. But there are so many gaps in this. And I feel that main gap, one is this pre-entry side, is that it's become increasingly frustrating for me to see so much focus and money put into when people get out. Why do we not put money into people when they get in? And it's not an impossible thing. We don't have to, we've created a model that shows you don't even need to work with the DOC. We're like a swift boat operation, right? We're not a Titanic. And so we can do things very quickly to get information in, to talk to people inside, to deal with our ambassadors at each facility. But there's just this lack of imagination, I think, that we have to always work with the DOC, and that we have to always help people when they get out, or we have to always follow where the big grants are going. Like, we can force change in that realm to start getting to people while they're in, instead of waiting until they're struggling upon release with all these things and have to learn how to get a trade, or to be a father, or to just understand so many aspects of being a citizen upon release. So that's really what I think my focus is the gaps, and that's pre-entry. And on the outside portion of what we do, the uncomfortable outreach, which honestly, I think I'm going to stop calling it uncomfortable outreach, because outreach should be uncomfortable. If you're doing outreach and it's comfortable, it's not outreach, it's a handout. And so that part of it, with the correct the narrative and the vignettes I showed, is, again, it's also meeting people where they are in society, because this image that we're actually currently developing is a person gets out prepared and they meet a society that's willing to embrace them with opportunities. And there's so many gaps there, and that's exactly where I want to always be, is the gaps. And if it's not what we're, if I'm not able to do it with our organization, I want to be a part of getting it going. I want to be a part of that conversation and getting people to see things more imaginatively and more boldly and innovatively in this space, rather than the traditional DOC reentry and services like beforehand, almost, that are a lot of boys and girls clubs and things for youth. It's just, there's a lot of other ways to do stuff, and that's, I find my niche at, is being a part of that conversation and pushing people in that way where they haven't maybe thought that something was possible.
So Shannon,
Mary's
I
got a
have.
question. Oh,
Yeah, Mary raised her hand.
no.
Do you find that the institutions are cooperative and receptive to having this information disseminated to people? And I ask that because I've tried to send a book to somebody at an institution, and the hoops that you have to jump through just to get them a book is just mind-boggling. The book got rejected and disappeared somewhere. And then I hear stories of neglect and mistreatment. So that whole environment, I'm just wondering, are they receptive to what you're doing for the most part? So
currently, the DOC administration is better than it's been in well over 2 decades. That's the one thing I can say that Evers has done in this space. I could have a whole nother luncheon about my non-giving him credit comments, but you're absolutely right. It's depends so much on who the person is that is seeing the book when it comes in, because I guarantee you that the person that denied that book, probably the person that would have came the very next shift would have let it in. And I've experienced this myself time and time again with material that I'm allowed to have. I've been getting it for years. And then one day a staff member calls me down and says, "You can't have this." And I say, "Yeah, I've been getting that for like 3 years now. Why suddenly is this an issue?" Like, "Well, I don't know who's letting you get it." So it just depends on the staff member. But that's an issue. It shouldn't be that. The rules inside for literature getting in are set up so that they err on the side of caution. Staff do. It benefits them to err on the side of caution because they don't want to get in trouble or get a report or written up because they allowed some material in that would have been an issue. But if they deny it, there's no problem. They can deny everything and they'll be safe, and then their supervisor can deal with it, and the person inside can appeal, and you can make 1,000 calls and it's on you. He's already denied, he's fine. But with what we're doing is we have an email that goes in via this email messaging system. It's not a regular email. When I say that, don't think of the email you think of. It's the same as a regular letter, but it's via digital format. So they still can take 3 days sometimes. Usually take like less than a day, but they have to get processed and monitored and accepted in. On both sides, the emails they send us as well, or anybody outside. So that allows us to have a little more ease, is because when we had physical issues, we would get physical issues denied fairly routinely. But with an email, for whatever reason, they don't get denied as much. But again, they still do. And so it's just a crapshoot in that sense. It's like you send it in, you had a bad experience the one time, we'll send in 9,000 and probably maybe 150 will get denied. So it's just a numbers game. It's just odds. And they are receptive now more. The education director called me a couple weeks ago to talk. I don't know if that conversation will go anywhere. after that, but I know they definitely, just from my own experience and from other organizations that have been working with the DOC, Secretary Carr, for example, they are really more open to doing things differently, letting information in, letting people who are credible messengers, who are doing good work in the space, get involved. I don't know how far that will go. I don't know if that's sincere, but they're giving a lot of lip service. And there has been some superficial action showing that that is the truth. So what was the book, if you don't mind me asking?
My daughter corresponds with someone at Green Bay Correctional Institute, and I think it was a book of poetry.
Very interesting. I wonder if the title had something that made them, that is, yeah, that's just crazy. I'm not surprised at all.
You know, they have these rules about it has to be sent directly from.
Oh, that, yes, it has to be from a vendor.
So
Yeah,
it
it
was
can't be
from
from
a
an individual.
vendor. It was from a local bookstore, but for
receipts.
whatever
Has that a
reason,
receipt?
and the bookstore even said, you know, they were familiar with it, and they said, you know, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So.
And I saw you said a thing, Jenny, but it wasn't hardcover. They'll, unless they've changed recently, they'll let hardcover books in as well. It's the receipt has to be there, it has to be from a vendor, and you know the title. Yeah, it's.
Well, I'm pretty sure we did everything right because the vendor was very familiar with it.
Yeah.
I'd have to say the next book that we sent to him, I don't remember what that one was, but that one did make it through. But that was sent directly from Amazon. So.
Yeah, many stories there about Amazon and all the book denials that happen in there a lot, and the little tricks that people have to do to try and get them in. So yeah, we talked about that in our issue before.
It just, you know, it's just surprising to me that they would make it so hard for you to do something to make them better themselves or make themselves happier. The hoops that you have to jump through. It's just, I was just so surprised by that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So anyway.
I think you have a question, Natraj? Oh, you're muted, Natraj.
Yeah, one of the things that I come to hear is that the reentry planning process starts like 6 months before you're released versus like 2 years or 3 years. What is your experience with that?
For me, the reentry process started the second I was arrested, but that's because I did it myself. For the DOC, yeah, it's 6 months. They have these arbitrary numbers they choose. They'll probably provide some statistics about 6 months to release is when people really start thinking about it, or when planning is more likely. You know, it's crap. The bottom line is that reentry starts the second that you enter the system. By doing that, they create in a person's mind inside that they don't need to worry about the reentry until they're 6 months out. Dr. Conti, who was in the presentation we did yesterday, he had put together a video introducing us, and he has a program that is now been implemented entirely in the Pennsylvania prison system for all staff and for everybody that gets locked up there. And he talks about a story, and this story he talks about is one I've seen time and time again in my own experience inside, is somebody it was telling him, hey, I didn't get to take this program in time, and I have parole coming up, what do I do? And he's like, okay, what's the program? He says, well, you know, anger management. He's like, okay, what do you mean you didn't get to take the program? He says, they just didn't offer it to me. You know, my parole's coming up, and I wasn't offered the program. They didn't even get a chance to put me in one of the groups. And he says, okay, I'm confused, but don't they have a library? He's like, yeah. He says, doesn't that library have books on anger management and violence and so forth like that? And, you know, changing your paradigm shift in the way you approach issues like that? He says, yeah, I guess so. He says, did you check any out? He's like, well, no. That's the thing. There's a structure inside that they make you think, they make people feel, and I don't want to say it's all incentives. Everything in life is incentives. They incentivize you to think that I'll only worry about reentry when I get 6 months too. And I'll only worry about the issues I have in so much as the DOC provides me a program, because these programs are what allow me to move to a better facility, to move to work release, and to petition the judge for, you know, early release. They're not going to care so much if I did this on my own, but if I have a certificate, or if I follow the DOC's mandated roadmap to what they think is the best way to reenter society, or what reentry is, then that looks better for them and for me getting out and for parole and all these other things. So it incentivizes those inside to not be imaginative about what they can do on their own, about how they can learn on their own. They can, you know, you have many people I know that inside that did it on their own, but that's not the normal at all. That's an anomaly. People follow that structure that has been paved, that conveyor belt of the prison system reentry program. And yeah, so 6 months is what they say, but that's part of the problem. That's a big part of the problem, is that they only wait till 6 months, or 18 or 12, what other numbers they want to choose.
Okay, any more questions here from the audience? Dr. Hawks?
Is there time for more? I don't want to hold people up.
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, I mean, people can leave whenever they want to. And this is my daughter, Laura Hawks, for those of you who haven't met her. So please do.
Hello. Hi,
Hi.
thanks for letting me join this Rotary event today. I have a question. It's something I've been thinking about since having started to work with Shannon in the last couple of months. Working with you and other people who are doing really amazing work and have prior incarceration histories, I've sort of been thinking about how there's such a big barrier to getting funding for all of the great work that you're doing, and sort of just in the same way that we sort of need, like if you were an entrepreneur and you wanted to start a new business, let's say you wanted to start a new electronic medical record software that was far superior to any in the field and not single-handedly driving physicians to burnout, you would need so much capital in order to even enter that space. And I sort of feel like it's a similar analogy for people who are trying to enter like the nonprofit space, in terms of being able to have some degree of grant writing or some, sort of professional experience that you just can't acquire while you're in prison, in terms of gathering funding. And I sort of wanted to just know what your thoughts were on that, or if anyone else in the audience had thoughts on how we can sort of, not minimizing sort of the quality of the work that's proposed in terms of planning, and then that's needed really to get for people to be comfortable funding work, how we can sort of minimize the administrative barriers to that process.
Oh, this is only going a few more minutes. So.
I'm gonna wash my face.
Okay.
Well, that's a pretty big question.
Yeah, I definitely have my own thoughts. I didn't know if anybody else wanted to add anything, but I mean, I know you've talked about that before, Laura, so I was going to see if anybody would take a stab at it. Otherwise, I can definitely answer from my standpoint. Yeah. I come to a lot of things with a business mindset, and not just because that's what my degree is in. I just, in general, I understand the cause and effect of how organizations need to operate, and I always see, that it comes down to a value proposition. Is something offering value, and can you convince me that it's going to offer value, and can you convince me that you are the one that can do it? And so when I'm talking to potential funders and I'm talking to people that we partner with, the thing that I'm very aware of is that they have so many people coming to them. And I know a lot of people who are in this field who I can be very critical of the way they are approaching the work. I can be very critical of the way that the I guess results that they've been bringing for a long time in this space. And I'm also aware that you have to be at all times, people that are funding things, people that are, have grants they're giving, companies when they're sponsoring with something, if it doesn't benefit them, are they just gonna throw, like for us, our organization, a donation? Or do they, as always is the case, they have to find some value in it for what they're doing? And so I get that. I'm always very conscious of that. I don't think there's anything in life that is selfless. Everything is selfish. Everything I do is because I'm driven to do it. It's simple as that. I'm not doing it because I'm just trying to help people. I am driven to do it for whatever reason. I'm motivated and I enjoy it. So trying to find that way to get organizations to see that whatever it is, like in our case that we're doing, is valuable to them, because they can say we supported this great work, or we are participating in something that has an investment or return on their investment with the businesses that we're going to be trying to connect with. So there's a difficulty there on both sides. Even though it's very frustrating for me, I also understand that there's so many people asking for money, and there's so many groups that are trying to get involved in this, that how do you choose? And so that is my struggle as well, is finding ways to show that. I think two things. One, people aren't being as imaginative as they maybe can be. That's why they're supporting the same things over and over every year. And two, that maybe we're not getting our message across, or other groups aren't getting the message across as effectively to show that what they're doing is different, that it really is going to help people in a way that things currently going on aren't, and that we're the ones that can do it. So I guess I understand it all around. I understand the difficulty for those that would be potentially funding, but I also am very frustrated with, I think, this model that if you don't know people, you won't get to the person that can make the decision, or you need to spend the energy, as you referred to, Laura, that we're doing work. I need to spend that energy on getting money for something, and then it takes away from the work. And that's kind of what I've been dealing with lately. Is our efforts have been kind of being neglected a bit because I've been trying to network and fundraise more. And so it's just the balance. I think it's like anything, like you said at the beginning, Mary, it's like anything in life. That's life. And so it's kind of like it applies to this area, and just have to work with the reality of it, but then also try and keep pushing that message of opening people's eyes to the fact that they're funding things that aren't, the only way. And also try and keep pushing that message up.
Welcome to Lily. And we're just about out of time here, but just to unpack that question a little bit more, Shannon, what are there like one or two obstacles that you see to getting funding in particular? Do you need like administrative support that you don't have, or can you identify just one or two things that would make your organization more effective?
Capacity building would be fantastic. Like I was talking to Naira Jordan, American Family, yesterday, and she was saying, if we had money, what would I use it for? And I would not pay myself at all. I would buy a grant writer, and I would buy somebody for social media to hire. And I already have these people. It's just I don't have the money to actually make them come on board full time. They just help us here and there. But yeah, that would be it, because then that keeps us sustainable. Then we have somebody who can manage, the CMR for donors and for donors, and the grant writing, that can invest that time. And then that would, allow us to not have to really worry about that, because we can get ourselves on a strong footing. I feel like the work that we're doing is something that I am able to get people to see, and that we have the success behind it to get people interested. But I don't have time for grant writing. I don't have time for grant searching. It just takes away from the stuff that I think is really the work. And that would be it. Is this capacity aspects would be the first thing that I would use it for, and most importantly.
And then just one other, touching back to what Jenny said, do you want to just tell us a little bit more about your podcast, just for those people who do want to keep learning here?
Yeah, sure. So it's a good point, Jenny. I'm bad at plugging some of the stuff I'm involved in. I just talk about the work, and then I also feel like I'm just promoting myself sometimes, and it's really uncomfortable. But the podcast is a partnership between the community and the Wisconsin Decarceration Platform. And it's basically trying to do two things. One, it's interviews with people who are in prison to promote the successes, humanity, and agency of people that have criminal records. So we're interviewing people in prison, not talking about how difficult it is inside. We're not talking about how difficult it was for them growing up. It's not the difficulties, it's not the struggle, it's not the pity narrative. Those are all aspects of this that are very true. It's the agency narrative, the success narrative, and the humanity narrative. So we're just talking to them about what they've been doing that is something they're proud of, or what they've been doing that society can see them differently through those experiences and those successes. And then we're also interviewing people that are in organizations doing work out here, so that this is kind of an aspect of it that is specifically for other groups doing this work, so that they can hear what's going on in other organizations. They can hear what's going on from national interest coming to Wisconsin. So basically the two arms of it, the two goals, are to foster the successes, humanity, and agency of people that are currently incarcerated through interviews with them, and to increase communication and collaboration amongst groups doing this work out here, so they can see what other groups are doing and what's coming, to Wisconsin nationally for money and for power, because they see the state is pretty messed up in this issue. We're going to be interviewing Carmen Petrie from the Sojourner Truth Center coming up, in Dawn Barnett at Running Rebels. I think they're both pristine examples of understanding that there's this great opportunity and this need for collaboration. At the Sojourner Truth Center, they one time had a service they were doing. They realized that the Alma Center was doing it better. They stopped doing it, and they started funding the Alma Center. Like, that's a perfect example of when you realize that, you don't need to be doing something. Somebody else is doing it. Fuel that. don't just keep trying to do it because you can get money for doing it, because you just think you can do it better, but really the numbers are showing that you can't. So just stories like that, we really want to get those out to show there's ways to do it and that there's a great need to, communicate and collaborate better in this space.
Okay. Well, it's 12:46, and so I'm Shannon. I guess I'm going to turn the live stream off, but I would